Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 4X Method, the book launch. And I'm so pleased that you're here. I'm excited because today we're having an interview with one of our contributors, one of the leaders that is featured in our book. And I will introduce you to her in a moment. But first, I wanted to share with you, I'm so grateful that you have supported me in this journey with my book, with the 4X Method, the modern customer experience. And this is part of bringing you into the launch of the event so that you get an insight before that book lands in your hands. But it is now ready in Amazon and ready to be in your hands anytime soon. So this is an insight to the authors, to the contributors and the people featured in this book as well. So I'm Corey Davison. I'm the author of the 4X Method, and I'm really excited. I wrote this book for the change makers, for those of you who are in companies that are undergoing growth or with continuous transformation, and you're finding that as you grow, there's a greater separation, from the customer, but there's also all these silos start to form. And how do you bring these silos together? Where the 4X Method is the anti-silo antidote. So today I have the pleasure of introducing you to one of our amazing leaders who is going to share her story about undergoing growth in a tremendous growth, I should say, in a company that I had the pleasure to work with her and apply some of the elements of the 4X Method as well. And her chapter is about growing a software as a service company from the teenager to the unicorn stage. So who doesn't want to be a unicorn? And for those who might not be familiar with this language, a unicorn is a company that has reached a valuation of over $1 billion. And Anusha was a part of that growth stage, going from scale up to unicorn. And she we'll talk a little bit about the highlights. So I'd like to welcome Anusha to the stage, and I'll quickly introduce you and we'll talk about the book. Anusha, welcome. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me, Corey.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Thanks so much for being a part of the book and also for sharing your insights with our audience. Anusha, what I wanted to share with the team is one of the things that really stuck with me when I met Anusha. We met through through work, but really was over time, just to see your leadership, throughout your kind leadership and the way that you were not only connecting with your team, but with other teams with so much, confidence and at the same time, empathy too. And that has been something that I have seen developed over time, or it has been evident to me over different scenarios. And it has been such a pleasure to work with you and now to also call you my friend.
Thank you.
So wonderful to have you here. Anusha, can you share a little bit about your background? In your book, we talk about when you arrived at this company, when you arrived at Benevity, what did you find? And tell us about that story, like to paint the scenario there too.
Sure. So I joined Benevity now. It's almost 8-9 years ago. So quite a long time ago was, when my journey started with the company. I've since, of course, left. But, in that time period of something like 6.5 years, I joined at a time where they had created a product. We had some early customers, and we probably in our CX organization maybe had about 50 people, 60 people, and very much about Jack and Jill of all trades. Everybody did a little bit of everything. Everyone was invested in making sure that the customers were happy, especially in those early days. We want to make sure that every single customer is landing, is using the product. We can't, no startup wants to have any of their customers leave once they come in through the door. And so, that was the mantra, right? The culture was customer was first. We were doing everything to make sure that we could hold on to our customers and that they had a great experience. And when I came on board, this was sort of what I was walking into, which is fantastic because building that culture of customer being at the heart of everything, that is a very hard thing to do. And so I was coming into an environment where the founders had already set that up and really sort of, set the stage for what I was then brought in to do, which was, how do you scale that? How do you make it repeatable? How is that something that scales over time as you add hundreds more customers into the picture, as you grow in revenue, as your team grows and your team scales? How do you make sure that those processes scale, the culture scales, and then the people themselves can also develop and grow through that process? And so I'd been at it for about 3 years. And in that 3-year period, I think we had grown, as a CX team, somewhere like 50 people to 200, 250 people. And it was a phenomenal growth period for us. But it also meant that, we'd done all the blocking and tackling. We'd done the create the support organization, create the success, create the services organization, build out all the different components of it. But what you quickly started to see as we got to a certain stage was we didn't necessarily all connect the same way anymore, because we weren't all in the same office any longer. We weren't, you didn't have the water cooler effect of training that would happen simply because you would lean over. Because of course, during parts of this time also, we had a pandemic. And so there was lots of things that were going on in this. And so that was kind of where we started we actually need to document our journey. And we need to understand what everybody's doing, and we need to get on the same page. And so though we'd done sort of a lot of the processes that were in the 4X method, when we brought you on board and we started really working with you in marketing, and I think you'd done some work with our brand team, then we sort of looked at it and said, well, what if now we extended it to a journey exercise where we looked at not just our marketing team, but now also our CX organization, which meant support, professional services, technology, looking at our customer success organization, and really sort of building a series of workshops to really help us understand current state. And therein, I think, was probably the value of the biggest exercise, which was we got to really see what our journey looked like today and what the customer was experiencing as they moved through that journey with all the different facets of our organization.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that background. It's almost like as you were narrating, I was like, oh yes, I remember. It's kind of like going back, to the, and I'm sure that many people and many people in our audience might relate that it's like, oh yes, I'm going through it, or I've gone through it, right, in different scenarios. So, what were some of the as a leader, you were facing, all these challenges. What were some of the things that surprised you, for example, or that confirmed, that this was the right path, and bringing all the teams together that came out of all of those, that exchange, right? That cross-functional exchange with other teams.
Yeah, I think the amount of surprise that people had with each other, where it was like, oh, I didn't know you were doing that. I'm doing this over here. Oh, I didn't know that the customer got this email, this phone call. We asked them to do this thing, and all of a sudden you realize that it's not just one ask you may be making of the customer. You may be making 5 asks. It's just coming from 4 different people. Or maybe there's an element of, oh, if I piggybacked, the thing that I'm doing over here with the thing that you're doing over here, we may be able to create a moment for this customer where we can build some momentum. Because sometimes, for the customer, for the client is, or customers, you all may call them, there is a set of things that they are doing in order to achieve their business outcomes. And we want to guide them down a best practices path. But to guide them down the best practices path, one part of it is to tell them what the best practices is. But the other is to also create the journey in a way that just automatically guides them through it. And that's what this journey sort of allowed us to do. And the surprises in here, the unknowns that were in here, really helped us understand where we had opportunity to bring teams together, to maybe stop work that was no longer necessary, to really emphasize and put investments in other areas that perhaps we didn't understand we really needed, but now we could very clearly see as we looked at the journey that there were gaps in what that experience was for the customer, and we needed to fill them quickly.
Fantastic, fantastic. And in your chapter, we talk about when we were talking about this whole process. We also touched on the case of like change is not easy for everyone, right? Can we talk a little bit about I mean, you were a senior role, and you're in an executive VP of customer success, at a growing organization, and then you get it, you understand what is required, but what about the other teams, right? Like, what did you discover in kind of like how to lead others throughout this growth period, right? And all the transformation that needed to happen.
Yeah. I mean, change and change management, we all say those words, right? We all know when we worked in big projects, when we look at, any sort of evolution that, an organization will go through, there's an element of change because, when you join an organization, you join it and it looks a certain way. But in high growth, that organization is constantly changing on you. And so you're having to adapt. So more than likely, you're hiring people who love that type of environment, that dynamic environment. But it's also one of those places where when it's so dynamic, it's hard to stay in sync and stay aligned with each other. And so one of the things at Benevity that we put a lot of focus on was actually talking to people about what is that change curve that people go through. I think you sort of alluded to it. Leaders start from a place where, oftentimes we get, perhaps sometimes, especially large changes, we get advanced notice. And so we have time to process the change. We have time to sort of think about what that might mean. We play out the different scenarios. We make a decision. We build this whole plan on how we're going to execute it. And so we on the change curve often have kind of gone through this change curve and are already on the other side, right? We're like, great, it's fantastic over here. We just need to bring everyone with us. But sometimes we forget that when we roll it out, which might be days, weeks, months after we have first heard it, our people are going through the change curve. And so sometimes you have to come back in the process and you have to explain why you're doing things. You need to give people insight. You need to help them through that curve if you want them to come through it. And so because we spent a lot of time talking about change as a concept, we're talking about the change management curve, talking about sort of the psychology of it, it was really helpful when we went through change because we could we had the self-awareness and we could self-identify where we were on that change curve. And then it gave some language for both leaders as well as individuals to be talking about where they were in it, because sometimes the change would be hard. It changed the way in which you worked. It changed the expectations that people had of your jobs. It changed how you might have been measured on, whether you were doing well at a job or not. And so part of this is also how are we helping people understand the end state that we're trying to get to, see that path, and empower them to also help navigate how to get to that end state. Right. And I think that in some ways was, because we put so much emphasis on it, I definitely credit that education for helping us through what could have been an even more challenging time than it was.
Great. And one of the things that stuck with me as well was that I love that you referenced as well is that, the premise of the 4X method is about if you focus on the customer, on bridging, the customer, the employee experience, the brand experience, and the product experience, you have a winning formula for growth, right? For customer, customer retention, customer growth, and therefore, grow the company as well. So you have all these cohesive parts working together. Yeah. And one of the things, I'll just read a bit of a quote, so that you referenced in the chapter. Is as a customer success leader, I didn't have the framework of 4X, but effectively my mandate was fourfold like that. And the challenge becomes, how do you bring the experience equation together where all of these different facets, namely, the customer, the employee, the brand, and the product, have the time to mature and also know the direction to mature in.
Mm-hmm.
When we were talking about, this challenge that you already had as a leader, and also bringing change into the organization, what did you find, or how did you find, the 4X method supported you in that role as a framework?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it all sort of starts with, we talked about empathy at the beginning of this chat, right? And part of that empathy also creates space to understand motivation. And when you've got very different functions across a business, we're all trying to do the right thing. We're all trying to grow the business. We all want the customers to do well. And we want our customers to succeed and achieve their goals as they use our products. And, we need to sort of see that as all one journey, as a, call it, rallying cry that brings us all together. Otherwise, the danger that often happens, especially, the faster a company is growing, the more sort of complexity that is there in the business. It's very easy for us to be very siloed, as you speak about, right? Marketing can do their thing, product can do their thing, CX, support, we'll all go about and we'll be very narrowly focused on what our goals are. And what something like a customer journey or just the 4X methodology sort of allows us to start to see is actually these are all related goals that we have. And that was very helpful in the exercise because though we had a culture that was very much about open door, having conversations, making sure that those conversations were frank, and allowed us to sort of air our issues and talk about them. What this was constantly reminding us to do was to remind us that there were multiple people who were sitting at the table designing with us. It wasn't just our team by itself. And so even as we did the workshops, we made sure that we had people from customer marketing who were sitting there. We sometimes had product managers who were part of the equation. We had people from support. We had people from our sales team. So at different points, we brought those voices into the equation, which I think at the end of the day was very helpful in both crafting our current state, but also helping to get buy-in on how we wanted to evolve to our future state.
Super. I love that. I remember watching a movie, right? Kind of on all these different parts, it's like, I always like to say, it's like IT, actually, they're people, right? They're actually, bring them on in the conversation. It's like, IT is not just IT, right?
They are absolutely, I think especially operational teams, oftentimes, it's easy to sort of forget that they're the backbone of everything that we do in an organization. And so you absolutely need to bring operations along because they're the ones that are going to give you the leverage to really scale as a company.
Exactly. And Anusha, one topic that we discussed as well in the chapter was that side effect of all of this collaboration. What did you notice in regards to the employees, professional growth, or can you talk a little bit about kind of that ripple effect, or what was the
and by no means is this sort of the only reason. There were lots of different reasons that were part of it. But I think if you just kind of evaluated my time at Benevity, sort of, where that organization is now going and where it's scaling, I think what I'm particularly proud of is a lot of the people who were part of that, who might have been early leaders in their career and now sort of gone on to becoming very senior leaders within that organization, or have left the organization and have gone to other companies where they're now taking that role as leaders who are doing very similar things, but now scaling it in different industries, different products. And so that there's something quite sort of, I think, empowering about going through journeys like this together, because you learn so much in a short period of time. And we did it at such a scale that there's a lot of experience that you then carry forward into your careers, myself included, right? It was a very transformative part of my career, and I'm very fortunate to have taken a lot of the learnings and those experiences that I now continue forward in my career as a chief customer officer at a different company. And so, I think back to those folks who I still interact with, and now they're in some ways my peers and coworkers and folks that are in my network and in my industry. And it's really great to see that we all grew through that process together.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, Anusha, absolutely, your chapter is full of insights. There is a section, we wrap up in the chapter for those who are listening and want advice from Anusha. She gives advice to leaders. And this is where I'm going to, basically it's like, we learn from the best, right? So if you want to learn from more about Anusha's insights and absolutely, read the chapter as well in the book. The case study is really good, but it's also the insights as a leader. And so you have a number, several advice in there, and you're really, one of the things you mentioned is your role becomes about bringing the people together. For those who are listening, what would be your advice in regards to where to get started if you want to bring alignment with people? Like what is something that you have learned that is a good starting point when you're struggling to,
when you're struggling to kind of bring a vision to life, right? I think it starts with two things hand in hand. It does start with empathy, which we've talked about. But there's also another thing in here, which is humility. It starts with the humility to know that you don't know everything. It starts with the humility that irrespective of what your title may be, could be very senior in an organization and could be very junior in an organization, somewhere in the middle, it doesn't matter. You have a set of experiences and you have a voice that needs to be heard and is part of that equation. But you also have to create space so that others can also be part of that conversation. And so I think, if there was one thing that I would say is oftentimes we really sort of advocate, and, if you're a leader and you're driven, we're going to try and create space so that our voice is heard. But if you can create the space so that you can hear what others are saying as well, the output of what you might create is so much more powerful than any just one voice would have created. And so I offer that, always have sort of the humility to know that you don't know everything and somebody else is probably going to come up with some great ideas. And I think the other piece that's in there is, I think there was Patrick Lencioni. He's an author who's written many books as well around, the dysfunctions of our team and what makes it work. But one of the things that he said in there is he has this concept of a first team. And that first team is, how do you make sure that you as a team gel together and create focus so that you don't become very functional in nature, but rather you think about the business as a whole, right? You are operating at a level where you are a first team member who's driving the success of the business. And then secondarily, you are running the function that you are responsible for. And that's always stuck with me because I think one of the things that, especially as a leader, we can become very protective about the work that we do. It helps us control our days and our environments. But if you can really focus on the larger picture of what you're trying to achieve as a business, you can start to see that sometimes you're going to have to give up a little bit in your little corner in your area, but the greater return might be something, even more beneficial for the business. And so I offer those two things up.
And that, my friend, is why I love Anusha, and that's what makes a great leader, right? In Anusha, and why I'm so grateful that you were part of the 4X Method book, because it deserves to be, like you said, to share your voice, right? Is one of the messages that is really important. Is like, don't wait for permission, to raise your voice if it's the right thing to do, if it's benefiting the company, if it's benefiting, others in the company as well. And it's part of your growth, right? And so, and of course, as a result of all of this, you grow, your company grows, everybody wins, right? Your customers, are happy. And I really appreciate, Anusha, this insight as well. One question I have is so what's next? So you spent, this many years, with Benevity, successfully took it to a unicorn stage along with, other leaders and of course all your peers. So kudos, what a great experience to have. And so what are some of the next challenges that you're pursuing, or adventures that you're going through?
My adventures. I've had so many adventures, Corey, in the last little bit. But I think, I love that journey of sort of scale up to unicorn. And so I'm now on to my next journey with a company called Onboard. We do board governance software solutions. And so we're very much on that journey as well. And so there are lots of things that I learned on the Benevity journey that I'm hoping to apply. And there's new lessons that I'm learning. It's a different company. It's a different product, different solutions. And so I'm getting a chance to learn with new partners, how to do that all over again. And so we're going through that, and that's always fun.
Well, that sounds really exciting. On to the next growth, right? Successful growth initiative as well. So wishing you much success. I know that this is a new exciting grounds as well. And of course, for our team members, where can they find you? Or for our audience here, where can they find you and learn more about your this new journey, or follow your journey basically.
Fair enough. Well, I'm no social media expert like my friend Corey here, but you can always find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to connect with me.
Okay, so you see, now Anusha is not the best kept secret in the world, because I'm revealing her to you in the world, and I know that you also, as much as you like the human connection, also we all enjoy the privacy too, but in a collaborative world, I encourage you, to, if this resonates with you, send us your feedback. We love to hear, what of this message really resonates with you. What does it mean? What makes you curious? Write it down, take it back to your organization, to your career. Ultimately, we want you, we're thankful, and we want you, our audience, to grow as a result of this conversation. Well, you'll find in the book. And if you haven't ordered your book yet, you can go to the4xmethod.com. And when you pre-order the book, we will have it sent to you by Amazon. We'll deliver it to your address. And but at the same time, you will be a part of the live launch party that is coming up. You'll receive the invitation for this live launch party. And who doesn't like to party? I do. There might be some music and dancing too. Just beware. So it'll be a virtual party. So if you're not, in our region, which is Calgary, absolutely, you can also be a part of it. And now we're also open. The 4X method is you can pre-order it in Canada, in the US, and in Australia. If you're not in those regions, reach out. We'll make it happen. We'll send it to you. Ultimately, we want more people to have this knowledge and this anti-silo antidote in their hands as well. So with that, thank you so much, Anusha, again, for being a part. And thank you, everyone in the audience. We look forward to your feedback.
Oh, thank you so much, Carrie. I can't express just how much I've enjoyed this process. And thank you, Corey, for really sort of creating the space for us to share our voices too.
Wonderful. Likewise, thank you, Anusha. And thank you, everyone in the audience. Have a fantastic day and share your feedback with us. Talk to you soon.